my next new best camera for street photography with a still screen with a full frame sensor. What is that camera? I want to show you my list and my choice after using lots of Sony cameras and lots of lenses for street photography and for day-to-day photography. So let's talk about this now. Hi there, Tudor Matescu here. In this video I want to share with you my journey in the Sony full frame system and what is my next new full frame Sony camera that I will use for street photography. So let's start first. Why Sony? First, Sony has great, amazing, top-notch AF, the best on this planet, I would say, in small cameras that can be used for street photography. Next, you have lots of lenses and especially third-party lenses, also with AF and also with manual focusing, with dedicated electronical chips so you can communicate EXIF data. You have all the adapters in the world. You have top-notch image quality regarding the sensor and how the sensor is rendering except the colors, and I will address the color problem. But overall you have almost all. There are some tidbits there and there that are making from a Sony camera an unusable camera for street photography. But you may want a full frame camera for street photography that is crazy good, that is delivering, and you can accept the downsides. The downsides in general are: it's not looking retro and nice like a Fujifilm camera, like a Nikon ZF camera, or like a Leica M camera. It doesn't have the nice colors of a Fujifilm camera or of a Leica, Canon, Nikon camera, especially the old models. And also you have a very loud mechanical shutter. So these are problems, and we must resolve these problems if we want a full frame Sony camera to use it in street photography. One of the reasons, how I've said, to take a Sony camera and to use it in street photography, it's the top-notch AF and the top-notch image quality. If you are a black and white shooter, I would not see why not use full frame. Full frame, it's the best choice, the best for black and white. I am definitely pro full frame for black and white portraiture, for black and white street photography. And the next reason why would you want to choose a Sony full frame camera is that you have tilt screens. You have some cameras from Sony that have tilt screens. This is huge. You have that tilt screen, that it's a huge and big deal in street photography. So letting all things aside, Sony, it may be possible to offer you what you were always looking for. Tilt screen, full frame, great AF, great small, compact lenses. So what are my choices? First, I've used Sony A7S, I used Sony A7RII, I've used Sony A7R3A. What an amazing camera, and now I am using Sony A7C. I sold Sony A7RII because I said I will never use it, but I am already regretting it because that camera had a tilt screen and a more silent mechanical shutter than Sony A7C. Boom. So let's start first with Sony A7RII. This is the best choice, I would say, the best value choice that you can go in for it. The Sony A7RII has all the whistles and bells you could want for a street photography camera, and now it's ultra cheap, brand new or from the used market. That camera is amazing good, but you have two problems. The two problems are not so nice colors, yellowish tint, hard to edit colors. Not impossible, but again, I do not like the Sony A7RII colors. Next, you have not so good dynamic range. The other cameras that I will show you have better dynamic range. When I've edited the Sony A7RII files compared to Sony A7RII files, I was feeling that I was missing the dynamic range from Sony A7RII. So better dynamic range on Sony A7C and also on Sony A7RII. So if you are okay with the lower dynamic range, with the very fast AF, better than Sony A7R3A, I would say go for Sony A7RII. You can work out those problems. There aren't impossible problems, and there aren't big deals. So if you find a great offer for Sony A7RII, get it. All the third-party lenses will work very good with the AF of Sony A7RII. Sigma lenses, Samyang lenses, and also Sony lenses. So a great still camera. What an amazing camera Sony launched, that Sony A7RII. But now comes my next camera that I had installed and used for 2 years, I think. Sony A7RII, a great camera, amazing camera, great dynamic range, great colors, better than Sony A7III, but also not as good as Sony A7C and Sony A4 and the latest color science from Sony, but also better than Sony A7C. Big sensor, sufficient, I would say, 47 megapixels, so you will be able to use that camera in full frame, but also in APS-C mode. Boom. The only problem that Sony A7RII had, it was that I didn't like the AF with third-party lenses. So unfortunately, because you had a big sensor with third-party lenses, especially in low-light environments, it was possible to miss shots. Other than that, great, amazing camera, and I'm really sorry, so sorry that I've sold it. Because these cameras, Sony A7III and Sony A7RII, have tilt screen, and you can put the mechanical shutter in first curtain electronic shutter. This means it will be a pretty silent mechanical shutter. Not very silent, but not as loud as Sony A7C. So Sony A7C has a big problem for street photography because it has that loud and strange mechanical shutter sound. And this is my third option that I'm using for the moment. But Sony A7C, it's great regarding the following options. You have great colors, very okay colors. It's not like on Sony A7III and not like on Sony A7RII, so you don't have that yellowish tint. The colors are good, no worries, I'm really not complaining. Of course, you don't have great JPEGs as on Fujifilm, but you can take the colors wherever you want without any problems. And you can use any lens and get the color that you want, easy peasy in Adobe Lightroom using cobalt profiles if you want cobalt profiles or presets. So anyway, a better sensor for color work. The next downside that I have with this camera is that it doesn't have a tilt screen, and this is very annoying, especially with different focal lenses, and also you don't have a silent mechanical shutter, how I've said. So this camera, it's pretty annoying to be used with a 50mm lens, with a 40mm lens when you want to get close. So it's not an ideal street photography camera if you want a silent mechanical shutter or a tilt screen, because all these cameras that I've listed from Sony don't have a good electronical shutter. So you have bending and warping for fast moving subjects. These cameras aren't ideal for this, but I have a camera that it will be. So what is my dream next new camera that I'm thinking about? And now there are two cameras in this category because Sony launched the third iteration. So the next camera that it's on my list, and I think it's one of the best Sony cameras to have for a street photographer, it is Sony A7 or Sony A7 Mark II. Why is this? First of all, regarding the weight, they have the same weight, almost the same weight as Sony A7RII. So it's not a big deal, 30 grams plus compared to Sony A7 III. Pairing a big camera with a small lens for me is not a problem. I like, let's say, big cameras with small lenses and not a big heavy front lens. And on Sony again, we have plenty of small tiny lenses. So you can have a very ultra compact body with a tilt screen, with a full frame sensor. And now comes the big part why Sony A9 it is so good. First, top-notch AF, undiscussable top-notch AF. And more than that, you have a true electronical shutter that can work without bending, without flickering. So you can use Sony A7 in full silence mode and you'll not have bending and warping for street photography. Boom. What does this mean? This means that finally you have a full frame camera with a tilt screen, with all the lenses in the world that you could ask and think, with color that you can take it wherever you want, especially with Sony A7 Mark II. And this means finally you have that full frame tilt screen dream camera for street photography. So what more could you ask? Yes, it will not look retro and it will look like a Sony camera, but in the end you have a tool that will do the job great without any of those constraints that we feel as street photographers on streets. So tilt screen, great AF, great selection of lenses, and a true silent electronical shutter, but also you can use the mechanical shutter. That again, it is more silent with front electronical shutter curtain than Sony A7C because you'll not have that artificial sound. So now for a street photographer that wants a Sony full frame camera or wants a full frame camera with a tilt screen with interchangeable lenses, then Sony A7 or Sony A7 Mark II are one of the best choices. The other choice, of course, is Leica Q3 or Leica Q3 that cost a bunch of money and you can't change lenses. So I really do think that now Sony A7 it may be the best choice for a photographer that already has Sony lenses and wants all these advantages for street photography. Tilt screen, silent mechanical shutter, great AF, full frame sensor. Boom, there you have it. Now, in conclusion, which camera to get between all this? Well, again, it really depends on what you want. Sony A7RII with that big sensor was really helping me get nice shots. Also, there is another camera for Sony, but also it cost a bunch of money, not like Sony A7 Sony A7RII that has a dream screen. But the downside of that camera, for me at least, it's the weight. The weight, it's huge. Putting a lens and you have at least 1 kilogram on a Sony camera, and also you'll not have a true silent electronical shutter. On Sony A7 II, you have a true electronical shutter that is working with fast moving subjects. So overall, if you are on a budget and if you want a camera that is new and not so beaten up, because it's possible to find an A9 pretty used, so it's important to find a camera that it wasn't so beaten up because it's a professional camera. And I think it's hard to find that on the used market. But now I do think that it is possible to find a good Sony A9 Mark II that it's not so beaten up. So overall, all these cameras are great, but I do feel that the best budget choice without a true electronical shutter that can be used in street photography, it is Sony A7RII. So you can work that camera and get wherever you want with that camera. Also followed by Sony A7RII. If you want to use just Sony lenses, it will work great, amazing great, but with third-party lenses, it is possible to have some misfocuses because you have a big sensor and unfortunately, they didn't upgrade the firmware to have a faster AF. But if you want the fastest AF and a tilt screen and a true silent electronical shutter, then there is no camera like Sony A9. So this is my next new camera from Sony, Sony A7 or Sony A7 Mark II, depending on the offers. A full frame camera with a tilt screen without any compromises regarding the sound of the mechanical shutter. Use any lens from Sony and get nice looking pictures. Tell me your thoughts, tell me your ideas, and also please subscribe now to my channel, subscribe to my newsletter for more photography tips and tricks, and also please be sure to check the next video right now. Click here right now.